Did you know that Japan has a 0% homelessness rate? It may not be as great as Finland's, and it may not be as fancy or as nice. Apparently, there's a dark secret to the 0% homelessness rate in Japan, and a video by Explained with Dom is going to tell us why. So let's get straight into this today and see what the dark side behind Japan's 0% homelessness rate is.
In the many ways that Japan stands out, there is one particular statistic that completely sets it apart from any other country in the world. Despite being one of the most populous nations, it is the only country in the world that has a homeless population rate of almost 0%, while the United States is experiencing a major homelessness crisis with the
Okay, so right off the bat, I think that that's probably not a true statement. It's definitely not a fact because there's quite a few other countries, most of the ones that you all are at, that you're listening and watching this from, does not have homelessness, especially not compared to the homelessness that we have here in the United States.
the number of people living on the street rising every year, Japan seems to have found the solution to a societal issue that was thought to not really have one. But if you look past the headlines, the situation starts to look very different. The reality behind this seemingly amazing success reveals a disturbing and dark reality about what life in Japanese society is like, and what is really going on under the surface. So how did Japan manage to have 0% homelessness rate? And why is it actually not good news for the country? This is the dark secret of how Japan solved homelessness.
So, in this instance, though, let's keep in mind Japan has a tremendous population. I mean, the population that Japan has is a lot. A lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. But that doesn't mean that it can't be done and that it can't be done the same way. Because in that contrast, it's like me saying that the reason why we can't have better paying jobs at McDonald's in the United States is because it would cost a Big Mac to be outrageously priced, whenever we know that in Scandinavian and Nordic countries, you all have a much better pay scale, even for working at McDonald's, and yet it's not $15 for a Big Mac.
Is the dark secret of how Japan solved homelessness. According to official statistics, Japan, a country with over 125 million residents, has around 3,000 homeless people, about 0.003% of its population, which is way less than other countries with low homelessness rates like Switzerland and miles ahead of countries like the US. But why exactly? Well, there are several reasons that are often mentioned as the cause of this extremely low rate. So first, being homeless is actually very difficult in Japan, and in the Japanese culture, it is incredibly stigmatized. According to a founder of a non-profit organization that's supporting the homeless in Japan, there is no culture of compassion for homeless people in the country, and they are usually seen as people who only have themselves to blame for their situation, and who deserve no help at all. This is even stronger because the majority of homeless in Japan are men, who are traditionally expected to be self-reliant, and their failure to do that is seen as an embarrassment, both by the public and by themselves.
Now, I will say, I believe that that stigma and that thought process probably translates very well here into the United States. I'm quite sure that many of us in the United States, including myself, have had these types of thoughts towards homelessness and towards homeless people. You know, we've all looked at them and thought that they're a bum, that they're worthless, that you're in the situation that you're in because you chose to not get off drugs, you've chose to not seek mental health counseling, you've chose not to do these things, you've chose not to be a society member. However, we also at the same time walk blindly past them, and instead of that stigma forcing them almost to get out of that situation, we cater to them, give them things, and give them benefits to allow them to continue living on the side of the road in a tent.
As a result, the authorities tend to make it harder to actually be homeless than in most countries. Any kind of begging in the public is banned by law. Homeless people tend to be pushed out of sight, and cities like Tokyo are known for implementing what's been called anti-homeless or hostile architecture, like parks that are locked at night so that people can't sleep there, or benches and other city features that are specifically designed to make lying, sleeping, and prolonged sitting on them uncomfortable in order to
Yeah.
discourage homeless people from staying in the area, and so making it both.
And I believe New York City and a few other very big cities here in the United States, they have also implemented a lot of these architectural um, designs. You know, they've created bus stops and implemented different things. I think there's one, actually, I think it's in Los Angeles. Not long ago, they implemented new bus stops where there's absolutely no seating whatsoever, and it's just a little awning type that you can stand underneath to get some shade. And even that isn't actual shade either, because they don't want you to be able to sleep underneath it in the shade.
Difficult and socially unacceptable to be homeless contributes to the low rate, as it is something most people try to avoid at all costs. What also helps are some of Japan's unique policies that, while not designed to reduce homelessness, helped to do it anyway. Japan has very strict laws on basically any drugs other than alcohol, and very severe punishments. And as a result, only 1.6% of the Japanese population tried drugs other than alcohol in their lifetime, compared to
Yeah.
46% of Americans, which means that drug addiction in Japan is barely an issue. And according to Tom Gill, a Japan-based social anthropologist, this is another key factor. At the same time, Japan has a
Just as I'm pretty sure, like in Finland or many of these other countries like Switzerland, where they have very low rates of homelessness, there's also very low rates of drug use, especially harder drugs than, say, alcohol or marijuana, um, or these lower classes of drugs. However, they all, of course, can lead down to a further road, especially if you have underlying mental health issues. But definitely having such strict anti-drug laws plays a big part in this too, because it the drugs feed into the mental health. So taking away the drugs already takes away a big part of that homelessness issue. And then now you just got to worry about the mental health, right?
very robust healthcare system, which is also significant since 30 to 35% of people who experience homelessness in the United States have a mental illness. And while in Japan, people with severe mental illnesses tend to be placed in mental health institutions, in the United States,
We
they
don't.
often end up on the street. And finally, Japan has relatively accessible housing because it builds more houses than any other developed democratic country. Unlike most Western countries where building housing became increasingly difficult due to various regulations, Japan took the opposite route, and it has very few restrictions, making it very easy to build anything, and making it relatively affordable. So that all
Yeah.
sounds great, and on the surface, Japan can be an example of a country that basically managed to solve a major social issue. Except that's not really true.
That's
Despite
right.
the
If you haven't ever seen, I'm almost certain, like Japan, China, I'm sure even India, a lot of these high population countries that are so concentrated in little areas, the living spaces, the living conditions to a lot of these people are horrible. They don't have more than a cardboard box to live in almost. Yes, they are not homeless and they have a home and an actual shelter and a place to go at night, but it's not really a home, but it is a home.
official numbers, the reality is a lot more grim, and there are many more people without a home in Japan, but they are hidden away from sight and government statistics. So how is that possible? As you might have seen in another one of my videos, in the
Ooh.
1990s, Japan experienced a severe economic crisis when the stock and real estate markets collapsed. In the following years, it
So there's a video called Dark Side of Japan. We're definitely going to have to check that out in the future. I am definitely interested in seeing more of this channel. Hopefully, this continues to be good content. We'll see.
became extremely difficult to secure a steady, regular job with a decent pay, and so millions of people were left to survive on low-paying temporary part-time jobs. Many of them never managed to recover, and they became known as Japan's lost generation, people with no status, no place in the society, and no future. As a consequence, many of them were not able to hold down an apartment and pay rent every month, even in a relatively affordable Japan. But at the same time, they would do anything to avoid living on the streets, in order to avoid the shame and stigma from the society that comes with it. And so the phenomenon of cyber homeless emerged. Basically, Japan has a wide network of 24-hour internet and manga cafes, where people pay by the hour and can stay as long as they want. And since the 1990s, many of members of Japan's lost generation have begun using them as temporary shelters. They don't have beds, but people often sleep in the computer cubicles. And over time, the cafes expanded their services to offer food, drinks, fresh underwear, or showers. Gradually, this became an industry of itself, and
So you're pretty much living in the cafe. It's an internet cafe with individual cubicles so that way you have some privacy while you're on the computer. And then that privacy cubicle has turned into now people living there and using that as a way for them to sleep and do their extracurricular activities. We have a lot of that. In correlation would be people that go to the gym a lot, or say Planet Fitness. It's $10 per month. So for $10 per month, you get unlimited access, 24 hours per day. You get free showers. You get all that stuff. So you can go there, and I know a lot of people that have done that, like going through a divorce or a breakup in a relationship or something like that. They will utilize that for $10 per month. Well, you could pretty much live in your car and then go hang out at the gym for a few hours, watch TV. Then you could take a shower, get your free soap and shampoo, and then you get, of course, free towels. And they also provide like free pizza once a month. There's all kinds of different things you can get for $10 at Planet Fitness. But they utilize that and then sleep in their car in the parking lot and practically live at the gym. It's a way that they get around it. Where there's a will, there's a way, and whenever you don't want to be a part of that stigma, or you don't want people to know that you're truly homeless, these are the types of things that you do and resort to, unfortunately.
today, the cyber cafes are basically a uniquely Japanese concept of commercial homeless shelters, ones that you have to pay for yourself, which is, by the way, not even that cheap. Prices for an overnight stay in a small booth cost somewhere between $17 to $28. The
Wow.
netcafe refugees, as they are known in Japan, often have some kind of a low-paying part-time or temporary job that doesn't pay enough to rent an apartment, but they can afford to pay for a few hours in an internet cafe every night. These netcafe refugees are homeless. They don't have a home or a permanent address, and they're excluded from many aspects of life. But they
Yeah.
don't look like it. They don't sleep outside. They work, and they do everything they can to maintain a clean-shaven, polite, well-kept appearance, to avoid the shame that comes with being homeless in Japan. That's why the government statistics of homeless people in Japan are considered wildly underestimated. Non-government organizations estimate that the real numbers of people living on the streets in Japan is at least 3 times higher than the government says. And
Wow.
that's even without taking in account the cyber homeless, people staying in internet cafes on most nights for at least few hours. If they would be included, the
So again, even then, these weren't the types of homes that I was necessarily referring to, but the people that are living here still goes back to my statement of they have a shelter in a private space, but it's not a home. It's not anywhere that they can call theirs. It's not a permanent address. It's not somewhere that they can get mail. Um, I don't know if they do physical mail in Japan. Would it all be email at this point? But you don't have any type of personal belonging. And that's what sucks the most is whenever you don't have any type of personal belonging. Because whenever you don't have that, then it's hard to have any other type of belonging because you're still trying to find that for yourself.
The real number would be radically different, since in 2020 it was estimated that at least 15,000 people lived in cybercafes in Tokyo alone, 5 times as many as the official number of homeless people in the entire Japan. Now, in one way, this phenomenon of cyber homelessness can be seen as positive. On one hand, it helps people to avoid falling on the very bottom of the society, and it allows them to keep some level of dignity even though they don't have a home. But at the same time, the existence of the netcafe refugees demonstrates the incredible problems that the Japanese society has. A whole third of the entire Japanese workforce, over 22 million people, are part-time or temp workers, not by choice, but because they can't get a regular full-time job. Not all of them are homeless, but most of them are only paid a minimum wage. They struggle to afford a normal rent, and they have no prospects of their economic situation ever getting much better. And so even though Japan's official homelessness rate is much lower than in the US, the percentage of people living in poverty is actually higher in Japan than in the States. And while
Yeah.
only a few end up on the street, many more end up on the fringe of the society, stuck living in cybercafes and capsule hotels, and in a never-ending cycle of not being able to get a proper job to get an apartment, and not being able to get an apartment to get a proper job. Because of societal pressure, they prefer to remain invisible, and society prefers it as well. A problem that stays out of sight is a problem that can be easily ignored, and the government can continue to claim a 0% homelessness rate. But underneath, it is a symbol of all the things that went wrong with the Japanese economy, and a problem that's here to stay, as the number of the invisible homeless is only about to grow.
Yeah. Okay, so now we know that Japan's government count of the homeless population and it being a 0% homelessness rate is pretty false. It is not accurate whatsoever. And that would lead us to the conclusion, of course, that the Northern European countries or the Scandinavian countries, the Nordic countries, places like Switzerland, Finland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, all of you all still continue to have a much better homelessness rate and continue to take care of your people way better than what is projected and wanted for you all to see according to the Japanese government. Either way, homelessness isn't a joke. It's not something to take lightly. I don't think any of us really take it lightly. It's me, Bryson P. Have a great day, great night, whatever time it is that you see this. Goodbye.